theory is a strategy that uses mathematic matrices to determine the best course of action when a choice needs to be made that involves other participants and outcomes depend on the choices each participant makes. The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior was written by John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern in 1944 and is the text that created the interdisciplinary research field of game theory. It is mathematical. It contains no advanced math like calculus and is mostly made of logics, set theory, and functional analysis. It attempts to apply math to human behavior in situations of economic importance and attempts to find an exact description of the individual method to obtain a maximum of utility. This means, dear hero, it uses math to determine the best strategy to obtain the most gain in gambling games. In games, as usually understood, the total proceeds are always zero. One player can only gain what the others lose. Players only pay to each other and no production or destruction of goods is involved. Economically significant schemes are not like this. In them, the sum of all payments will not be zero and not even constant. We call the first type zero-sum games and the second non-zero-sum games. An example of each is as follows. You bet your buddy $5, the loser pays. This is a zero-sum game. One player can only gain what the others lose. On the other hand, a bet made at the casino is a situation where one's win does not necessarily mean the other's loss, and one's loss does not necessarily mean the other party wins. In a casino, you make a bet against someone else and it is paid by the house, which is also who profits off of all bets. An easy way to remember the difference between a zero-sum game and non-zero-sum game is that a zero-sum game is when the loser pays and a non-zero-sum game is where the house pays. Game theory is of extreme advantage to anyone who can use it. The original text states that the mere act of taking a chance in gambling is an act that obliterates the mathematical expectation. Therefore, dear hero, when gambling against mathematicians, it is imperative that you get them emotionally invested so that you may exploit their emotions to push them to act against their best mathematical interest. The use of matrices allows game theory to be easily translated to the layman. It is the way that the strategy evolved beyond the card table and into the real world. In the study of evolutionary behavior, we are introduced to the game theory strategy known as the hawk-dove game. It is a combative game of displaying aggression, escalating to violence, or retreating in defeat maneuvers. The risk in the game is injury or death, and the reward is any resource that increases an animal's evolutionary fitness. In this game, we imagine that two animals are contesting for a resource like food. During the contest, an animal can behave in one of three ways: display aggression, escalate aggression, or retreat. An animal that displays aggression does not injure its opponent. One that escalates may succeed in injuring its opponent. And an animal that retreats abandons the resource to its aggressor. The hawk strategy is to display and escalate until it is injured or the other retreats. The dove strategy is to display but retreat if the opponent escalates. If both escalate, one is injured and forced to retreat. After much study, it is concluded that one should always play as a hawk would play if the rewards are worth the cost of injury as defined in the payoff matrix. Another famous game theory strategy is the tit-for-tat strategy. It is applied in the study of evolution and cooperation among non-kin. Evolutionary behaviorists use it to help explain logically how and why reciprocal altruism exists. The strategy goes as follows. On the first move, cooperate. On each succeeding move, do what your opponent did in the previous move. This is cooperation based on reciprocity. The tit-for-tat strategy is fundamental to the establishment of an effective set advantage. An effective set are players who enforce their advantage by forming an alliance. A few key points to maximize its success are: 1. Never be first to defect. 2. Retaliate only after the other has defected. This discourages repeated defections. 3. Be forgiven. Forgive after retaliating just once. This helps restore the mutual cooperation and maximizes rewards. The tit-for-tat strategy was a conclusion formed from iterated play of the famous game theory game, The Prisoner's Dilemma. For the Prisoner's Dilemma game, we imagine that a crime has been committed by two persons who agreed not to snitch on each other if they get caught. They do get caught, and the police bring them in for an interrogation. They put them into separate rooms to prevent cooperative plotting during the interrogation. The police have enough evidence to convict both on lesser charges, but need to have them implicate the other in order to get them for a more serious crime. Therefore, the cops offer each suspect a lighter sentence if they snitch on their partner. If suspect A accepts the offer to defect, and if suspect B maintains the agreement to cooperate, then suspect A gets the maximum reward of a shorter prison sentence, while suspect B gets the maximum punishment of a longer prison sentence. If both maintain their agreement to stay quiet, they both get the lesser charge and receive a short, but not the shortest, prison sentence. If both snitch, the cops will defect on their deal and get them both for a lengthy, but not the longest, prison sentence. After comparing the outcome of different combinations in the matrix, game theorists have concluded it pays best for a suspect A to defect no matter what suspect B does. The dilemma is that it is best for everyone if everyone cooperates, but defection is the better strategy mathematically when the outcome depends on what another person does. In real life, this game was studied with real-life criminals playing against criminals, and this was compared to college students who played against other college students. Criminals always chose to cooperate with their partner, whereas students always chose to defect. In the end of the experiment, criminals ended up with significantly less time because they always played for the short sentence instead of the shortest. This tells us, dear hero, if you must plot something, never plot with the uninitiated. Returning to the card table, where game theory was initially introduced, we will now look at poker. The game theory optimal poker strategy is a defensive strategy that aims to make the player unexploitable to opponents by using optimal probabilities to maximize their gain. The strategy compares all combination of hands, different positions, pot odds, and a number of players to create memorizable charts that help players determine what to play in what position and how to bluff in the long run. It is well worth the investment of money, time, and effort for any player serious about becoming a dangerous poker player. Some tips from the game theory strategy for the uninitiated are as follows. If you always bluff, you'll get called with losing hands. If you never bluff, opponents will fold when you have good ones. There is a mathematical advantage that bluffing will maximize your long-term take from an opponent that only raises to maximize their gain. Bluffing allows weak hands to win and gives strong hands the ability to lure others into a false sense of security as they bet against it. In other words, a strategy that always bluffs is better than one that never does. The more players there are, the less bluffing occurs because there is more likelihood of a winning hand being dealt. Generally, in large groups, anyone in the pot can win it and isn't bluffing. A high raise and inconsistent confidence in raises are signs of bluffing. The chances you will get a double in your hand are outlandish, but once you have it, there's a 1 in 11 chance a triple will end up in the river. Most deals can be won with a high card. Try to only play core cards and doubles. Always try to raise if you're in late position, and if you're willing to check, you should raise. After the flop, which is the first 3 cards of the river, if you're still looking for a card to win with, the chances are that you won't get it. In the long run, you'll lose if you always try to chase a win in the last 2 cards of the river. In closing, dear hero, from game theory, we can extract some rules to life that will mathematically work out in our favor if we obey them. These rules are: 1 will receive more tangible rewards through aggressive behavior than through playful behavior. Cooperation will maximize rewards, but selfishness is safer. When cooperating, never be first to defect. Retaliate after a defection. Forgive after retaliating just once. When plotting, never plot with the uninitiated and never betray your co-conspirators is the key to maximum rewards. In poker, we know that the strongest players bluff more often than they have winning hands. That we know that a high card can win the most deals. We know that doubles are unlikely, but triples are somewhat common once a double is made. We know there is a statistical disadvantage to trying to win a hand on the last 2 cards in the river. And finally, and most importantly, dear hero, from game theory, we learn that one should only gamble against a mathematician when we can get them emotionally invested enough to discard their mathematical precautions.